Hello, and welcome everybody to the Longbox Crusade bonus episode. I'm Jarrod Ulrich, the yard sale artist, and we are going to talk about ranking the Leprechaun movies. This past March, I did what everyone should do. I watched all the Leprechaun films. Okay, there are 8 of them. I watched all 8 during the month of March, and I've come now to you. I'm going to give you my rankings and thoughts on them. And yeah, this should be a good time. I guess I should preface it by saying the only one I think I'd seen before I did my March run was the first one. Yeah, I think I'd only seen the first one. And I found a DVD set of them that had all the rest of them at a Goodwill. So I buckled down and watched every Leprechaun movie out there just for you, just so I could rank them. Will your rankings of the Leprechaun movies match mine? Let me know. We've got comments here at YouTube. So put in the comments if you think I'm crazy or if you thought I was spot on. And I suppose we'll get started. All right. So there are 8. And coming in at number 8 at the, the bottom rung is Leprechaun Origins. Yeah, this one was the easiest one to single out as like this is the worst one. And I think the worst part about Leprechaun Origins is that it's the one you could totally skip. By the way, this is the 7th. Yeah, the 7th one out of the 8. This one's a little different. This is the first one. I think it's the first one. Yeah, I think it's the first one after the departure of Warwick Davis. This one was made by WWE Films. One of their little people wrestlers, I believe, played the Leprechaun. It's very much the oddball of the series. It's just weird. The biggest problem with it is there's no actual leprechaun. There's no guy with a jaunty cap and a little suit and buckle boots and all that stuff. Here they really changed the formula to where the leprechaun is more of a monster or a creature. It's still tied to gold and it's still in Ireland, but they kind of like try to make it a monster, more so than the leprechaun character as Warwick Davis brought it to us. And I mean, he's the gold standard, if you will. Wasn't even trying for that one. But yeah, Leprechaun Origin's going to come in at the bottom at the number 8 spot. And it's the only one of the whole series that if you out there were like, hey, I've never seen these Leprechaun movies, I'm going to take a stab at this. It's the only one I could tell you could totally skip. You could skip 8 altogether, and or not 8. This is number 8 on my list. Number 7, 8 on my list, coming in at the bottom rung of an 8 rung ladder. But you could skip it entirely, and it'd be fine. It's so different from the other ones that it almost doesn't feel like it belongs here. It feels like it only belongs here because it has the word leprechaun in the title. Really, it's not an awful movie if you like a teenagers getting terrified in the woods by a monster type of thing, which is fairly common, and it's not too far off from what we have going on here, but you could enjoy it. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you it's an awful movie. It doesn't have great reviews online, but it's watchable and all, but it really suffers because of how vastly different it is from the other ones. So that's why it comes in at my number 8 spot out of 8. Coming in at number 7, and I want to reiterate, as we move from 8 to 7, moving up the ladder, this is where the biggest differentiation is. Like once we get into this one, Leprechaun 2, that I'm about to talk about, it's fine. It's fun. It's what you expect. It's that campy, silly. They haven't fully leaned into the silliness yet. They're really getting there. But I just want to reiterate that the number 8 spot, which was Leprechaun Origins. that's the biggest gap. Like once we get into 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on my list here, they're packed tight. All right. So this is a good leprechaun a good leprechaun movie. This is the second one. They hadn't quite figured out what they got. Like they had a success with the first one. And then in the second one, they're kind of like figuring out where they can go with it. And this one is weird because it feels that's what I'm looking for. It's sort of like not in sync with the other. It's like they had their first one and they knew they were successful, and they just did another one, and it's almost like it's its own story, not really connected to the first one, but it's still the same character doing the same stuff. I don't think they'd kind of quite figured out like how do we keep this going yet, and they kind of said, well, let's try this, and it was fine. It was okay. It was good. I enjoyed watching it, but I would say of all the other ones, aside from number 8 that I just that I just talked about, it kind of has the most forgettable story, and I think it's because all these other ones we're about to talk about all sort of are either we haven't talked about number 1 yet, the first one, Leprechaun 1. We haven't talked about that yet. Aside from that one, all the other ones kind of really play off of their location. Like the location really is what sort of changes the vibe of each one. And this one, it didn't like have an exact. I couldn't even tell you what the location was. I can't remember. It was just a Leprechaun 2 is just it was good. It was fun. It was charming. It's a movie that if you're watching them in order, it gets you from 1 to 3, and you're like, okay, that was fine. So yeah, it comes in at my number 7 of 8 spot, but I'm not hating on it. It's fine with me. Leprechaun 2 comes in at number 7. Moving up to number 6, we have Leprechaun 3. This is where they really start to figure out that the location can be the thing you play around with the most to get more from the Leprechaun. Okay. Leprechaun 3 takes place in Vegas, and that's where a lot of its fun and charm comes from, is they kind of play around with that. There's Leprechaun acting like Elvis, and it's Leprechaun in a casino and Leprechaun at a magic show, and it's all these very Vegas things that they're able to put the Leprechaun spin into. And this is where I think the producers, the production company, I think it was Trimark who started all this. What a great 80s production company. Anyway, this is where I think they really figured out that the real key to kind of going on with the series is changing his environment, changing Leprechaun's environment. And it works here. It was a lot of fun. Half the fun of this movie is is the Leprechaun and this dude who owns the pawn shop just kind of going at it. There's about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes of footage in the whole thing of the Leprechaun and the pawn shop owner. And I almost feel like the whole movie should have been the Leprechaun and the pawn shop owner, because that stuff was just crazy fun to watch. But yeah, this one really taps into, like I said, the location thing. This is where they use Vegas as their backdrop. They're really kind of figuring out how to get more mileage out of the Leprechaun by his environment. So this Vegas one, this is where, I mean, even though we're only at number 6 of a list of 8 movies, this is where I start saying they become fun, like a lot of fun. So Leprechaun 2, which came in, I'll even go back the other side at number 7. It's still fine and it still has its charm, but Leprechaun 3 is where they start to have the fun factor kind of ratchet it up. I'll get the words out. Ratchet it up. All right, let's move on to who's in the number 5 slot. It is Leprechaun in the Hood, which I believe is number 5. Appropriately enough, this is the 5th movie, and it comes in at my number 5 slot. Again, they've really figured out how to play with the Leprechaun and his environments. And this comes out in theaters at a time where sort of hip hop movies are becoming more popular. And they say, oh, well, let's Leprechaun in the Hood, right? Why not? And the one thing I didn't know going into this, because again, I watched almost all of them for the first time during March. I didn't know this one featured Ice-T, which I was very excited about. I like Ice-T, and I thought, oh, this is cool. So That had a lot of fun factor to it. And I think my only complaint about this one, the only reason it's not higher, because it is a ton of fun and ton of silliness. My only real complaint about it is there's long spells in it. Well, at least it feels long, where there's no Leprechaun. It almost feels like someone brought a script to Trimark or whoever had the rights at this point and said, "Hey, I've got this pretty cool, kids trying to make it in the hip hop world script for you." And the producers went, "No, okay, well, let's put a Leprechaun in this." And now we got a Leprechaun movie, because it's almost like that story, the story of the there's a trio of young men trying to become like a hip hop group, and it's almost like its own thing. And then the Leprechaun gets injected into all that, but it's of course entertaining to watch. It's bonkers as all get out. If you haven't figured this out already, I greatly reward bonkersness in this kind of cinema. Okay, this out there, it doesn't even necessarily have to be horror, but let's just say my 80s and 90s sort of weird movies, things that I enjoy. I greatly award bonkersness, and this is what this one has has a lot of it, and it's a lot of fun. It comes in at number 5 of 8, Leprechaun in the Hood. All right, moving on. We're moving to the top half now. So coming in at number 4 is Leprechaun Back to the Hood, which I think is movie number 6 in the franchise. And they must have hit some kind of pay dirt and had some kind of success with Leprechaun in the Hood, because the next movie that immediately comes out after it is Back to the Hood, Leprechaun Back to the Hood. And this one felt, how I just said that the other one sort of felt like it was a group of young men trying to make a hip hop thing happen story, and then they kind of injected Leprechaun into it. This one more feels like built around a Leprechaun story. Although one of the things that I liked about Back to the Hood, as opposed to Leprechaun in the Hood, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, because I just watched all these kind of rapid fire, but if my memory serves me correctly, Leprechaun in the Hood was the first in the series, and maybe the only one, where the Leprechaun wins in the end. Like he wins. He doesn't get defeated. He just wins. And that kind of felt like, oh man, you want to see the Leprechaun get his comeuppance and get defeated, and he doesn't. Spoiler alert. In Leprechaun in the Hood. So I liked Leprechaun Back to the Hood a little more, because it had a bit more finality to it. It still had the zaniness and bonkersness of the other Leprechaun Hood movie, but it was just a little bit, it was as bonkers, but it felt like the Leprechaun was more involved in the story. And another thing that really leapt out at me in this one is there's a character in it who at the beginning of the movie is very sort of unlikable and just sort of villainous, and he actually kind of has a character arc and becomes a key character into helping defeat the Leprechaun. And like, he has a redemption arc, and I'm a sucker for movies with redemption arcs, and that happens in Back to the Hood. So that's why it is in my number 4 slot. Now we're getting into the top 3. This is where your Leprechaun movies really begin to shine. Coming in at number 3 is Leprechaun Returns. As of the time of this recording, which is April of 2024, Leprechaun Returns is the most recent one. It's the last one. And I want to say it came out, I'm spitballing here, so pin me to this, but I want to say it was like 2018-ish when it came out, something like that, maybe 2019, somewhere in there. And, it came out after Leprechaun Origins, which, if you remember, is in my number 8 out of 8 spot. It's, again, the one you could skip. So I was going into this going, okay, I'm not expecting much, because Leprechaun Origins was a big letdown. But my glimmer of hope was the little movie poster you see here. When I looked at it on my little Plex server there, and I saw the picture, I said, oh my gosh, there's an actual Leprechaun. Because if you remember correctly, when I mentioned Leprechaun Origins doesn't have an actual leprechaun, it's more of a monster. I'm like, oh, I see a hat and an outfit, and it's got a leprechaun in it. So immediate improvement, right? But I wasn't Hopes were not high. There was no way I would have thought that it would have gotten into the top 3. Well, I was so pleasantly surprised with Leprechaun Returns, because this one, Leprechaun Returns, is the direct sequel to the first Leprechaun movie. It carries on the story of the characters. There are characters from the first movie, location from the first movie. All that is wrapped up into this sequel, and it's done pretty well. Pretty well indeed. Jennifer Aniston was in the first one, and the story of Leprechaun Returns is the story of her daughter. And spoiler alert, I do believe there's a little bit of Jennifer Aniston in this sequel. There's some, I think, some voiceover work. If it's not her, they got an amazing sound alike. But um, I think as the daughter is like remembering memories and you hear this voiceover, I believe it's actually Jennifer Aniston. I probably should have checked the credits, but if it's not, it amazingly sounds like her. And I thought that was really neat. I thought it was really neat that they got some of the characters from the original to come back, and the location from the original. And again, so this is pretty amazingly good. My hopes weren't high, but I would definitely, I might even encourage you in your Leprechaun, if you decide to do what I did and do a Leprechaun journey, I might even encourage you to watch one and then this one, Returns, and then go watch the others 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because this was a really cool sequel. And I want to say it was like 25 years later. And again, I would have expected them to kind of drop the ball. It's not Warwick Davis again. Warwick Davis stops after Return to the Hood, I do believe. Yeah, I think that's his last one. So this is a new guy, and I'm like, oh, it's a lot. That's Warwick Davis kind of was a big part of it. This is a new Leprechaun, an actual Leprechaun this time. Can he do it? And he did. He was really good. He was good. So I could certainly see where some hardcore fans of the franchise would be, if it's not Warwick Davis, then it's crap. But just as a fresh face guy going into it, I thought the guy did a good job. And again, this is a really surprisingly solid, engaging. I was paid attention during the whole movie, engaging and solid sequel to the original. That's why it comes in and surprised the heck out of me that it came in at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is the original Leprechaun. It's hard to beat an original. I almost, in some ways, like the last one we talked about. I'll even bring the slide back. I almost like Leprechaun Returns better than the original Leprechaun, almost. But it's one of those things where a lot of the reasons I like Returns is because how it plays off of the original. So you can't have that feeling without having seen the original. So that's why I eventually said, I have to put the original Leprechaun a little higher, because you need it to get the full enjoyment of Leprechaun Returns. So there you go. Number 2 slot, original Leprechaun, with a Jennifer Aniston before her career launched. This is Warwick Davis sort of inventing the character and putting it together. It's charming and it's fun, and it's in those early 90s horror films where they were trying lots of things, this one kind of stands out because of its oddballness. It's a wee leprechaun, which we think of as charming and sweet, but he's this villain, this murderous villain. They haven't quite figured out, it's the first one, of course, so they don't quite figure out all the rules. The rules are going to change as the movie, they're going to add some of this and that as the movies go along. But all the real good DNA of the franchise is here. Some franchises, take a few movies to find their stride. Immediately I think of Friday the 13th. Those are all good in their own way, but Hockey Mask Jason doesn't show up till part 3, right? So in that sense, they really figured out the Leprechaun really better than most in the first movie. And it is what you would expect it to be. It's silly, you laugh along with it, yet it's a horror film. And it's, of course, a novelty to see Jennifer Aniston before she became a megastar. So there's a lot going for this one. It has that early 90s charm about it, and it's always going to have a place in horror film history. So there it is at number 2. Coming at number one, process of elimination. You probably figured it out. I told you I greatly reward bonkers. Coming in at number one is Leprechaun 4, which is Leprechaun in Space. I told you earlier, A, I champion bonkers. And B, they really figured out that messing with the environment of Leprechaun is really how you sort of milk the idea and get more mileage out of Leprechaun. And man, they went all the way when they went to part 4, Leprechaun in Space. Okay, this movie is bonkers, 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 and also bonkers with a dash of bonkers. It's, I mean, if you haven't seen it, and you just think to yourself, what would a bonkers Leprechaun in Space movie look like in your head? You probably have figured it out. It is kind of what you would think it is. It's nuts. It is absolutely nuts. It is knucking futs, as some people would say. It doesn't. Okay, in some senses, it is very much your Leprechaun movie. I guess what I'm trying to say is from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, especially, it's not a ton of continuity. That's where I'm going with this. It's just kind of the Leprechaun in different situations, and this is the one that is the most different. And then, of course, in the Hood movies, again, Leprechaun, different situations, but those two kind of feel like they go together. 4 is the outlandish standout. If you think of a movie like Aliens or something like that, and then you add Leprechaun to, like, think of the Space Marines, okay, and then you add Leprechaun instead of Aliens, that's what you get. This is Leprechaun in the future. There's future technology. There's Space Marine type characters. There's cyborgs. There's the Leprechaun becoming a giant at one point. It's crazy. And it's the best kind of crazy. It is so much fun. So this is my number one Leprechaun movie. And it's I would say by far. Remember, I said after we got past that first one, they're all packed in there kind of tight, but 4 is always gonna be the one I think of. And I can completely understand if you're watching this video and maybe 4 is your least favorite because it's too far in that direction for you. And maybe you're more of a part 1 guy or a part 2 person. I get it. It really comes down to your love of bonkers. And I love bonkers a lot. So Leprechaun 4 delivered on every level. I could watch it over and over again. I could watch, again, pretty much all these over and over again. Not so much Origins. Again, I don't think Origins is a terrible movie. It just doesn't fit in this franchise. But let's not dwell on that. Let's just Leprechaun 4, Leprechaun in Space. 2 thumbs up. I loved it. And that is the ranking of the Leprechaun movies. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. And if so, go ahead and, give this video a like. Again, I'm interested to know your rankings, where you agreed with me, where you thought I was crazy. Put that in the comments. I'm going to read them and and we can talk about them and have fun with that. Of course, we here at the Longbox Crusade, we're in lots of different places. We're doing tons of podcast stuff. We do stuff here on YouTube. If you want to get in on the behind the scenes, all the access, as we call it, you see on the bottom of the screen. If you go to patreon.com/longboxcrusade for as little as $1 a month, you can join that. It's lots of fun. You get early access to content. You get priority seating to be a guest on our shows. You get entered automatically in some raffles we do. It's a good deal. So check out patreon.com/longboxcrusade if you want to get in on that. Otherwise, just do the like and subscribe thing. We'd love it. If you want to chat with me personally, I'm online at, hang on, where am I pointing? Right there. Aha. See there? At Yard Sale Artist. That's X, Facebook, Instagram. It's all at Yard Sale Artist. Stop by, say hello. I'd love to talk about old movies with you, video games, comic books, all that stuff. So that's where to find me. And of course, you're already at the Longbox Crusade channel. Check out some other stuff. And we'll be back later with more content. I assure you. Thank you so much for checking in with me on ranking the Leprechaun movies. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, hit those comments. I want to know what you think about Leprechaun movies, and let's talk about it. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to act froze as I end the stream.